Hey everyone, welcome. We are live on Devs in the Sheds. You can see that we've got a couple of guests today, and you've got Paul and Aaron. I suspect are in the AWS offices. Is that correct, Aaron, Paul?
That's right. Today,
Yes.
Cool, nice.
Office this week. For anybody that was missing us last week, I was in Seattle last week for one of our offsite training. Got this pretty cool new jacket, which I'm pretty happy with. We couldn't align the time zones last week, so sorry for everybody that did that. But this week we have an exciting segment coming up, and some of the people that are really well connected with Amplify.
Yeah, so maybe let's go around the room, right? Abdullah, do you want to start first? Do you want to give a little bit of an intro to yourself to everyone that's watching on the live stream?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to be on the stream again with you, Matt, Paul, and Aaron. It's been a while. My name's Abdullah. I'm the product manager on Amplify. I manage specifically Amplify JavaScript and Amplify Flutter. So I'm excited here today to talk about Amplify Flutter and all the cool things that we have in the pipeline.
Very nice. So we might go through to Ashish. Do you want to give a little bit of an intro to yourself as well?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Ashish. I'm the SDM or software development manager for the JavaScript and Flutter teams at Amplify. I've actually been working on the Amplify teams for a little more than 3 years now. I started as a dev on the JS team and then helped launch the Flutter Library, and now I manage both the teams. Really excited to be on the stream with you folks.
Very cool. It's awesome to hear JavaScript and Flutter united, right? Because I think these are the two paths to the future of the front end from my viewpoint. Last but not least, Dylan, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks. Happy to. I'm just an engineer on the Amplify Flutter team. I've been really involved with some of the cool work we've been doing lately to bring Amplify Flutter to all the new Flutter platforms like web and desktop. And so hopefully today I'll be able to show you a little sneak peek of all that.
Cool. And I love how humbly you say you're just
an engineer.
Just an engineer.
Yeah, more like a freaking rock star.
I mean, exactly. As engineers and coders, we should be, we should be humble. We can do anything, right? So just an engineer is very nice and humble. Dylan the dev, love the nickname as well.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Shout out to Malback on chat. Good to see you in the room as well. So I think it was a while back we met Malback in Sydney, earlier in the year. So it was really good to hang out. We came to Seattle this time instead of sending everyone over to Sydney over in Australia. With that note, I guess we've got a lot of people on chat and live stream at the moment. Let us know where you're all from. What part of the world are you from? I'd be interested to hear. And maybe whether you've used JavaScript or Dart and Flutter before. And if you've used JavaScript, let us know your favorite framework as well. So let me add to that question. We'll see who we've got in the room, considering all these guys are listening intently to find out what their customers are using, behind the scenes as platforms for potentially Amplify framework use cases as well, right?
Yeah. We've got a bunch of people using jQuery that are probably going to want some advice here.
That's the forbidden word right now, Paul. I can't believe you just said that.
And we've got Matt saying where are your hoodies? Everybody loves a hoodie, so Amplify hoodies would be great for people that would want to do that. So Matt, who's one of the developer advocates around Amplify, let him know. Let's hear your comments around Amplify and what you want out of the product, and maybe he can help in part of the comments as well today.
Yeah, that'd be great. And by the way, that's Malback Matt, not Matt Coles Matt, although I'd love to hear all your feedback as well. It can be confusing considering the amount of Matts that we have at AWS sometimes. Cool. And we can see there's San Jose, so somebody joining from California, and we've got someone joining from a whole bunch of cool memes, which is awesome. I haven't actually seen these little emoji type things before, but that's awesome. I'll put them up on the screen here. So kind of diving into it, I guess we've been using Amplify in our projects for a fairly long while, so we have a lot of experience ourselves here. I guess over the last year, maybe Abdullah or Sheesh, do you want to kind of tell us the journey that you've been through? Tell us kind of like where you began a few years out, where we're at now, what you kind of see in the future as to where Amplify's heading. I think that'll be really interesting for our audience.
Yeah, for sure. I can give like some introduction about like Amplify and then also the journey so far. So at a high level, Amplify is a collection of tools and services that help accelerate front end and full stack mobile and web application development. And that includes a bunch of tools and services that have grown over the years. So there's an open source framework that consists of libraries for different languages and platforms, UI components that make it easy for just adding like flows to your application for authentication, storage, and so on. And also like a CLI toolchain to kind of create and manage your cloud backends. Earlier on, I think the first offering from Amplify was really the JavaScript library that you could use independently. And then the CLI came shortly after that, which made it easy for you to even deploy your backends and then integrate with your app. So I think that was the main offering, I think around 2017-18. And then we focused to kind of expand the offerings to other front-end applications like iOS and Android, which I think we launched in around 2019. And then the Flutter library came about in preview in 2020 and GA Feb 2021, and was actually built on top of the iOS and Android libraries using Flutter plugins as the architecture. So it was supported for mobile, and coincidentally that worked out well also because Flutter at that time was stable only for like the mobile platforms, and web was kind of in beta. So it kind of was a good bet. And then now we're focused on expanding the Flutter support to web and desktop using Dart. So kind of moving where the ecosystem is going for Flutter developers as well. And then there's a bunch of other offerings at Amplify, like that allow you to host your web applications, or kind of a point and click experience for configuring your backends and managing users. So that's part of Amplify Studio and hosting. We can delve into that as well if you want. There's like a lot to cover, so we'll leave it open to you. But that's the journey.
Yeah,
so far.
Yeah, no, there is a ton. I mean, I was really excited specifically on the Flutter path, right? Because I've used JavaScript for such a long time. Using frameworks like Angular, React, and Vue, experimenting with Next. And I kind of came to a point where it's like, I kind of liked the experience originally being an iOS developer, developing on Objective-C and then a little bit of Swift. I liked the experience that Flutter was offering, where they had like this aim to go cross-platform. And I remember back in the day, I think all of you guys were quite stressed out actually thinking about it. But Flutter was only just emerging, and you were going to announce that we were supporting Flutter as an Amplify platform. And in that initial release, I think we had a 2-week period between Flutter 1.x being out and then Flutter 2 with some major changes coming out. And the team's like, yay, look, Flutter support 1.0. And then like the mad rush to kind of support all the changes that were in Flutter 2, right? Like, Abdullah, were you there during that time, or Ashish? Do you remember that? Those
I had the pleasure of joining after that happened. So
okay, yep.
I was on the team at that time. So initially the Flutter team was just about 3 engineers. So I was one of those 3, just an engineer, as Dylan said. And then the team kind of grew. We got more folks to join in. But at the time of the GA launch, like we already had our work cut out for us, because the Flutter community was moving towards null safety, and I think we were still pending those changes, because we had our preview out and we were working to kind of make sure all that stuff was stable for customers to use in production. So like right after the announcement, we kind of jumped on to making everything null safe, and then kind of had our work cut out for us, because the Flutter team is doing a great job kind of expanding their support and improving their offerings. So like once they announced stable for web and desktop, we've been kind of putting all our resources behind that. So yeah, that's kind of how we've been moving forward so far.
Yeah, it showed that they were serious about kind of like making it a strong language in the web and mobile arena. But at the same time, it was just scary the amount of work that had to happen to kind of for every developer to get there at that stage. So it's kind of like good and bad, exciting.
Yeah, definitely. One other thing I wanted to add was that this is a great example of how we are very customer focused at AWS, because this is like a publicly verifiable kind of thing where you can see the GitHub issue was open in 2018 when Flutter was still pretty new, and there were a lot of upvotes and requests from customers to kind of support this. But at that time, like, we didn't have a Dart SDK or iOS and Android support in Amplify. But we were looking into this, like, how can we kind of launch support for Flutter. But once we supported iOS and Androids with the Amplify libraries, we did a bunch of investigation to see if plugins would be the right approach to support Flutter on mobile at least. And then we were able to do that with a small team and get to preview. And then after a bunch of customers kind of adopted the preview, gave feedback, we were able to get that to GA. And then after that, the team has kind of grown, and we've been focused, like you said, on supporting newer versions of Flutter as they come out and more platforms. So it's been quite a journey that you can trace.
You said the team's grown. How big is your team now? You've gone from 3 to...
I think about 8 or 9. There's some engineers who work on multiple teams, but so you can see...
just engineers that work on multiple teams.
Pardon? And that's not Amplify, right? That's Amplify JavaScript or Amplify Flutter. Yeah.
Right. That's just Amplify Flutter, like the 8 to 9 engineers right now.
Yep, nice. And I think that race is also there in JavaScript land as well, right? Like, JavaScript has actually changed quite significantly over the last couple of years as well. It's a pretty straightforward bet that people are going to use Angular and React. Vue was like a little bit of an unknown, but it became very popular fast. And then we had like an entirely different approach come out with like SSR style JavaScript applications. We had Next, Nuxt, Gatsby, SSG type stuff as well.
Right.
Like, how have you guys, like, it's an exciting space to work on, but how do you guys even manage like the amount of different platforms that come out for languages with an Amplify? Do you guys have an easy path where it's like you evaluate each and kind of see if it works when it becomes popular?
A lot of the decisions we make are based on customer data, and that's why we're really fortunate to have Abdallah on the team, because he like really looks into that from like GitHub issues, customer emails, or like people reaching out on Twitter. We look at all the requests coming in, our own assessment of where the state of the ecosystem is. UI frameworks especially can get a bit difficult to understand what to support. Like you said, React and Angular are clearly very dominant, but there's like a new UI framework every few months. Same with like bundlers and stuff. And like you said, SSR is also a big one right now. So weighing the priorities is very important, and we basically look at a customer feature requests or issues on GitHub, and also like those that have already kind of adopted Amplify, like reach out to us on email and stuff, and we use that to kind of decide our path forward. And we are working on getting our roadmap slightly more public so that we can get feedback on our direction forward as well. But I'll let Abdallah talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, but it's definitely a very, very difficult task to do, right, Matt? Like figuring out exactly which front-end frameworks we should be supporting. Like what level of support do we need to make sure that we provide as well, because that changes as well from framework to framework. And it's definitely hard, especially on the JavaScript side, to keep track of all the frameworks that exist. There's actually a really cool website that shows you how many days it's been since a new JS framework has been created, and almost every day you open it up, it's been 0 days. So it's definitely an ever-growing ecosystem that we constantly have to keep tabs on. Luckily, the way that we built our technology here is we try to make as many what we call like as less of one-way door decisions as possible in the way that we build our infrastructure, to make sure that we support the widest variety of platforms as possible. And then I think we start running into issues when certain frameworks start like deviating a little bit from like some practices that have been in the ecosystem for a while. So there's a lot of frameworks that come out and they're very popular, and we support them out of the box just because we're following best practices that have existed in the ecosystem for a while. But then when you see like some newer ecosystems that are trying different things, they're trying new ways of really handling building front-end applications, then that's where we sort of run into some issues. But we're getting better every day.
I reckon that like one of the biggest changes that has come to the front-end space, like obviously we went from, and I mentioned jokingly earlier, like jQuery, we went from, you know, building our apps and building some sort of logic and validation, whatever, some trickery on the front end with JavaScript, to going to this whole like, all right, now I've got Ajax and I'm taking advantage of jQuery, to going to something that's like Angular. Then you've got like your state-based applications, like React, so that enables you to like, you know, build across multiple different applications, inject the thing, rather than having Angular and Vue as the takeover. The next generation or iteration of that is, of course, when React came out first, there were ways to force server-side rendering, but it was really hard, and a lot of work to do that. And seeing like Next and Nuxt come out to be able to say that like this is the way we're going to go ahead and build our applications. You know, that's something that I'm seeing a lot of people just say, like, we're building an application, it's going to be in React, but by de facto now, when you talk about React, you're probably actually dealing with someone that's building a Next application. We had a session last week, Matt and Aaron. Actually, I don't think, Matt, you were there, where we talked about this idea of like the $1 million stack. They use it as a, you know, to get people interested in it. But
this is Patrick's presentation. Yeah.
That's exactly
Patrick's
right.
One of our colleagues that came across to Seattle with us from Melbourne. Yeah.
And so he's just basically saying like our customers and people that he's working with on projects that he's working on in the ProServe organization reflects exactly what I'm seeing and exactly the questions that are coming in. Give us server-side rendering with React type front-end applications and a standard way of developing and building, but enabling us to do server-side rendering. So seeing Amplify go ahead and continue to support that and build on that has been like really good to see.
Absolutely. And what we're seeing as well, and what we're hearing a lot from customers, is that there's also this movement, which is really interesting, away from building front ends with microservices in the back end and we're sort of going back into the monolith with things like Next.js, where both the front end and the back end logic lives in the same project, and you're building those all in one place. And that's where we see Amplify fitting in so beautifully into that picture, because you're able to, within the same IDE, within that same session as you're developing, you're able to basically build up all of the necessary pieces that you need for your back end. You're able to hook it up, whether that is you want to do on your front end, whether you want to do that through your API routes, whether you want to use SSR or client-side rendering. All of that are things that you can do when Amplify just helps you do that even easier with AWS. So like we feel like there's a really, really a strong value add that we have as Amplify, like for developers that are really building these full stack applications.
And I think the other thing that just to call out a little bit here as well is, you know, Next can create monolithic applications, but we are also seeing we're seeing some healthy pressure to go towards micro front ends as well. When Paul, Aaron, and myself are talking to customers, it's like, how do we break up these apps and then have like some form of communication layer between the apps and like passing of an authentication token. And I don't think there's a straightforward way of doing that yet, but that's probably something that, you know, I guess over the next couple of years, as that settles down, like there's probably going to be, I think Amplify will support the stuff out of the box, but I think there's going to be like patterns that we probably need to share with the community on how to tackle each of these different ways of doing a micro front end, right?
I think what's really interesting that I'm seeing right now is what Astro is doing with islands, for example. I think that's really fascinating. I think being able to kind of replicate that sort of micro front end setup that allows you to be able to have these modules that communicate with each other and they're independent and they can render independently. Like, I think that's really interesting. Like, from what I'm seeing from the community, it seems like there's a lot of positivity towards that approach as well. So definitely Astro is one of those things that we're keeping on our radar.
No, very nice. Anything to add to that, Paul or Aaron? I can see you chatting in the background.
The Astro docs.
I'll just quickly look at some of the Astro stuff.
It actually, it reminds me of some of the micro front end presentations that we've done in the past around on some of these our episodes here, like using the what's it called, Webpack 5's federated module to do, basically pull in self-hosted components. So islands are just micro front ends again. It's just another way of, like to Matt's point earlier, there's so many different ways of doing it that, obviously when sort of, I guess, the top few patterns sort of surface to the top, obviously Amplify will support that, but then it'll be a little bit of education around, what's the best way to do it in terms of, working with Amplify, and in terms of what are the languages that we're supporting, out of the box, React, Flutter, whatever, how we're doing these different, because the different language frameworks obviously are going to support different ways of doing micro front ends as well. So there's a lot coming, I guess, a lot that needs to sort of surface to the top in terms of what's the better solution as opposed to just supporting everything.
And yeah, that thing, like the amount of times that somebody will talk to us about they want micro front end, so this mechanism to be able to deploy like individual components somehow on their website, and the use cases are like all over the place. I mean, Matt and I spoke to a customer the other day that was talking about specific widgets that they wanted third parties to deliver and embed. I've worked a lot where people are saying, I've got an existing application that we need to refactor off into smaller areas. And there's a huge risk in deploying the monolith. So we want to break it out to have like these placeholders where something like Astro Islands, the concept of that is taken into consideration. Then you've got another customer that would say, hey, we know we're going to have multiple teams working on this thing. It's going to boom. It's going to be big. So we need independence in the way we deploy and manage these services. So every situation needs to be like examined in isolation as itself.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of the time it's just like, a SaaS company wanting a marketplace, right? And it's like, that could be a single page application that like each of their marketplace providers embed, and then you have like this shared schema or data structure of what might be important to pass between the two and produce as a client-side SDK, right? Like that seems to be like the number one thing that I've had conversations around lately. And then you've got like the other idea, which is like, you've got like 100 web devs working on the one app in one company. And then it's like, how do we segment these things so we can be more productive, because everyone's just dealing with git merge constantly, right? And so you've got that problem there, and you can either fix that by building micro apps that like compile at build and share data and have a shared data structure, or they might be done at a runtime, right, in some way as well. So this is kind of where the space hasn't settled yet, but I think yeah.
I was going to say to that though, like, this is not something new as well. Like, we've been dealing with this since the days of iframes, right? So, you have an HTML with iframes calling in 3 different HTML sources, like going back to the old days of, basic markup and not having back to our jQuery days, like, but it's tools like Amplify, right, that allow us, with the tool chain. It's more than just, yes, we support this language, or yes, we support the deployment of services in the back end. It's the entire tool chain which allow us to then build out those opinionated, like scaffolds of, this is how you would do it in that language, and this is how we achieve it. That's exciting. Like, that's exciting to me, because I'm like similar to Paul. I think Paul probably has a lot more, a lot broader scope in terms of the different types of customers that are facing a lot of the different type of challenges with micro front ends and the like. I work more sort of within large enterprise, and they're kind of the more to what Paul was saying more to what Matt was saying in terms of the many teams trying to pull together resources and stuff. Their challenges are more around like the back end with DevOps and how we integrate from that side. So I think tools like Amplify, providing the front end opinionated way of doing things, will only just help to support those many teams working together in the back end to try and get their portion of the application out.
Yeah. And adding to that, I feel like what's really great about Amplify as well is that for those developers that have, or for those big enterprises that have that separation between what a backend developer is and what a front-end developer is, like, that's where Amplify being a la carte really becomes extremely powerful, because yes, you absolutely can use the Amplify CLI to set up your backend and to orchestrate that for you. But if you're in an enterprise environment where you already have a team that is responsible for doing all of that, and they use their own infrastructure setup, they have their own pipelines, they're using maybe CDK, maybe Terraform, whatever it is that they use on the backend to set up their infrastructure, and they want to continue to use that because they have their internal compliance. However, they want to use our libraries, the front-end Amplify libraries, in order for them to connect to the AWS resources. You can do that. You have the ability to do that. So like for a lot of, you can split Amplify in different ways and use the pieces that really make sense for your use case. And I really think that's where the power is with Amplify, is it, depending on your situation, you can pick and choose the product that works best for you.
Yeah. Also talking about these kind of patterns emerging and like, enterprise cases in particular, like that's where the cross-platform focus also kind of comes in a lot, right? Because companies are like, we want to build this application, we have this set of developers, we just needed to work on like iOS, Android, and web. What's the best solution for that, right? And just give you an example. In the case of JavaScript, that used to be React Native, and one really important thing that we do at Amplify is we don't just want to like get it working. It's about the developer experience being really great and really tailored to how that the best practices of that particular framework and what patterns the developers are familiar with, right? So sometimes it'll be iterative in nature. So things will work out of the box in React. Then when we started supporting React Native as a first-class citizen, we always kind of build plugins or modules that will support React Native or have dependencies specific to platform specific code in React Native for persistence or network detection and things like that. And similarly, like that same kind of demand is there for Flutter as a framework, because I think in terms of tooling, it's just a lot more seamless. And that's kind of how since we saw the bet with React Native also pay off and adoption grow, and like similar kind of requests come in for Flutter, we were like, okay, like let's give this a try. And actually really impressed by how good the Flutter developer experience was for building cross-platform apps, right from 2019 when we started supporting it, and how much it's kind of gotten better right now. And the power of like being able to deploy your applications, configure them in minutes, and like have all of that backend set up, and then also use the same code base to run in multiple platforms. I mean, the amount of leverage there is just immense. So I feel like developers have a lot of power today because of that, and Amplify is trying to do whatever it can to enable them to have that.
This is one of my favorite things about Amplify as well, right? Like you've got native support for iOS and Android. Coming from that background, there was always this nirvana of like, let's build everything once, right? And about 10 years ago, the answer was kind of like build it all in HTML, and you just didn't have that same experience that you'd have completely natively. Even now, like native, if you've got free development teams, like one for web, one for Android, one for iOS, like you can do crazy things with the experience, right? And how you build the app. But that's a lot of resources a lot of companies don't have. And so, React Native kind of came out and it became this fantastic thing that's like a halfway house. Web support's improved dramatically over the last couple of years, for React Native for web. But React Native itself, like, would give you like similar-ish, not exactly the same, like performance in terms of animations and things that are happening at runtime on the mobile device. It would have community libraries to access like native functionality on the phones. So it did really, really well there. And then Flutter's kind of come in with like its own philosophy and its own kind of reverse of that approach. And I think it's a great time to be a developer, right? I think semi-native experiences have gotten vastly superior, and hands down, the stuff that Flutter's done is amazing. Maybe what I'll do is I'll take this as a quick break to kind of share my screen, because this was one thing that excited me a lot when it came out. Let me see if I can bring it up.
While you're looking for it, I was just going to say, well, you found it now. I was just going to say, like, a lot of the web stuff that I've seen over as web has improved, it's taken over from a lot of the desktop. So a lot of actual applications written for Windows, written for a Mac on the desktop, it's now actually using web tech instead of, I remember the good old days of using the forms, web forms. Win forms, to build out apps. But it's all web, right, running on the desktop. And then the bigger problem to what you were saying, Matt, was when it was all HTML. It might work one way on the desktop, but then when you push it into the web and start viewing it in different browsers and viewing it in different places, it changes the way it works, or the way it looks. Sorry, it doesn't render the same way across everything. And that is even a big problem in, say, enterprise applications, where they're trying to build an app to look the same across every environment that they're supporting.
Yeah, and this is probably a philosophical, I can't even talk today, but philosophical thing that's like different between React Native and Flutter, right? And you can either end up in either of those camps, but both ways kind of like Amplify supports you. Like React Native tried to convert like a lot of the interface items to look native to each of the platforms, right? And to use the native features underneath the hood for each of those platforms. Whereas I think Flutter's kind of just said, like, no, what we're going to do is we're actually going to render the whole UI, and we're going to offer some really nice UI elements that you get out of the box that are going to support each of the different platforms and change depending on like what you need from each platform and the size of the screen, etc. So kind of, I pulled up the article, but this is what really excited me. Like it was a while ago actually, and you can see, Abdallah, you've got your name here, awesome, and Ashish. So this is kind of like the Flutter experience. Like we at the start of the year, if I remembered, like we supported like some of the elements of Flutter for mobile. But one of the things that I'd see in SpecRex is like, how do we get this working for web? How do we get this working for other platforms? And at the time, if I remember correctly, we were using kind of like the native libraries for iOS and Android underneath the hood, which made it hard to kind of jump out of the space. But maybe I'll pass over to Ashish or Abdallah. Do you want to talk about this release that happened in August?
I can give a quick overview of that. So I think very shortly after we announced support for mobile, we already started getting feature requests for web, because web was already available on Flutter, but may not have been stable and something that we couldn't support using plugins, because we had to go with the Amplify JS library in that case, or like consider writing in Dart, right? And even today, there's no official Dart SDK for AWS. So there was like a question on what is even the approach to take. So ultimately, I think we decided to go with a Dart first refactor to support this as our next major release. So it's making this preview available for all platforms that Flutter supports right now. So iOS, Android, web, and desktop. And we have to take a kind of strategic approach as to how different use cases get supported based on our categories, right? So we have categories for authentication, storage, and API and data store. A lot of these are built on top of each other. So auth is like a foundational category that needs to come first, and is also one of our most used categories by developers. So this was really the one that we wanted to kind of get out first. And I'll let Dylan dive into some of the technical approaches we took and the validations we did to go with this approach. But we launched not only the library but also the authenticator UI component, which is like a drop-in widget to easily kind of allow you to add the login flows into your application. And I think we'll have a demo of that later today as well. So Dylan, you want to talk more about how we got here from the time you joined the team? We were focusing on null safety for just mobile.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a whirlwind journey. I'll try to recap it as best as possible. But yeah, like Ashish said, like part of the foundation of any Amplify library is being able to talk to AWS. And that's like much more involved than it sounds. AWS requires like these protocols for signing requests to make sure that they're authenticated appropriately. It's called SIG-v4. And so we had to build out a library for that. And then like AWS supports a bunch of services, and they all kind of speak a slightly different variation of the same language. And so building out an AWS SDK basically for Amplify Dart to use was a big task in and of itself. And it was a prerequisite for expanding to web and desktop like we wanted. So It's been a long journey, but I'm really excited with the progress we've made so far and just kind of what it's unlocked us to do going forward.
Excellent. That's awesome to hear.
And Matt, I want to add to that as well. Like what's really beautiful about the approach that we've taken now with the basically rewriting our libraries in Dart is like really two things it's unlocking for us at a high level. The first one is the fact that we're going to be able to support all of basically the platforms that Flutter itself supports, so that we will no longer be in a place where we need to build specific libraries to target different platforms. And then the other piece, which is something that we've heard consistent feedback about, is I want my experience to be seamless in terms of using the library across all of the platforms that you support. Like right now, we run into situations where there's slight discrepancies between, for example, iOS and Android. So a big ask from our customers was like, that needs to completely not be the case for me as a Flutter developer building a cross-platform app. I am using Flutter because I want that seamless cross-platform experience. So we definitely heard our developers that are using our libraries loud and clear, and that's exactly why this was our path forward.
And part of that was leveraging Smithy, wasn't it? Like, I'm going to post the link for everyone to have a look at the chat. But Smithy is actually, so before Amplify, we've had the AWS SDKs, right? And they take advantage of like native features within different languages very nicely. They have very consistent documentation as well. And so one of the things that AWS did way back in the day was we open sourced Smithy as a tool for the community to use to create consistent APIs as well. Is that something that Amplify team leveraged as well when it came to documentation and consistent APIs? Is that part of the journey that led you to where we are with Flutter today?
I can take that one. It's a good question. Yeah, Smithy is a great framework that AWS is open source, and it's now like the de facto way for brand new services to describe their API, basically their contract between any client and any AWS service. And while we don't use it within Amplify, like to describe our own services, we do use it like in the code generation of the AWS SDK. So we can take this just declarative description of a service contract between a service and a client with Smithy, and then co-generate the AWS SDK that way, which saves us a lot of typing.
Nice. I know when we talk to customers and they go, how do you guys manage like so many different frameworks and languages with Amplify? And then they kind of say the same thing for the AWS SDK. That's like one way that I point them that we can kind of help the community, right? Because we have done this at scale for so many different things.
Absolutely.
I would love to see the demo, Dylan. Do you want to bring that up for everyone? Let's have a look at what was built with Flutter. That'd be fantastic.
Absolutely.
And let us know in the audience if you've got any questions. I can see Gemini Man, you've asked quite a few. You've had quite a few good things in the commentary. You mentioned iframe hell and micro front ends. My response to that is choose the right thing for the stage of the life of your product. When you've got 100 people on a team, like you do need to deal with the complexity of the micro front end, and we've got advice on that. But if you're a small team of 10 or less building, it's easier to build the one service or the one thing, right? But
I think that for this question, I think the question is mostly about like microservices. I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
That's right. I was picking on a previous question, but I put this one up as well. But
I wouldn't even say that. Like you don't have to use Amplify to do the front end. You can actually use Amplify to deploy your backend resources, right? I mean, obviously you're exposing an API and all that stuff, and you do want to link your front end, but you can still use Amplify to deploy all your backend and manage your backend for you if you've never sort of got into the AWS console and you don't know how to sort of work with all the different services. That's exactly what you start in the CLI, right? You create an app, you start in the CLI, you can start deploying your stuff out. You don't have to add a front end to it. That could be your microservice. You might have a couple of those as microservices.
Yeah, I think the point that I wanted to make is like I do feel like Amplify actually does give pretty good help here as well. It might just need a couple of blogs from us in the community that are working with day to day. But like a lot of customers will build their prototype in Amplify to start off. Others might just build their full application as well, right? Like any way. But then there becomes a stage where you've got a lot of infrastructure that you're building with Amplify, and you might move to CDK. And so that's why Amplify has CDK export and import. commands that you can use and leverage to start constructing things using like infrastructure as code, which Amplify is using behind the scenes as well. But CDK is really familiar for developers and quite fast to build in. And then the other thing is like we started putting in like container support like with an Amplify, so you can start to move like your lambdas into containers that, you know, as you build things out and your services get bigger, you might move into Fargate containers as well, which Amplify's got really good documentation for. I think Amplify is just like so large at the moment, like it takes a while for people to kind of get their head around on like how much you can actually do with it. And I really appreciate the fact that you have the freedom to take direction as your app grows. Whereas like I've worked with other front-end frameworks with back-end as a service in the past. And each time I've been fairly locked into those vendors, like bits of infrastructure. So I guess that's why I lean towards Amplify. But Dylan, I can see that the demo is ready to go. So let me put that up. Here we go.
Awesome. Yeah. So the quick little demo to just kind of show off some of the cool functionality we've got now. So what you're seeing is the same app written in Flutter running on 3 different platforms. So I've got an iPhone simulator, the Mac OS app running natively, and then a Chrome browser. And this is sharing the same code base like any other Flutter app, and it's using Amplify. It's using the new authenticator component, which provides this really clean onboarding experience. And it's going to allow us to sign in or sign up users and get them through the flow to be authenticated. And it has full support for theming and customization as well. So right now it's just using the default material theme, which also responds to like system brightness changes. So if we change the darkness to be material dark, then it's going to update for that. And you can go and fully customize all the theming and colors as you would to match the rest of your app. So that's really nice. And so, yeah, with just like a few lines of code to get this set up, it's really quite simple. You just wrap your app in Authenticator. Let me see if I can bring over my other screen here. So the code is really simple. Yeah, I'm just wrapping my material app in an Authenticator widget, which I've imported from the Amplify Authenticator library.
Just want to make that a little bit bigger, Dylan, and then zoom in a little bit so we can have a bit of a look at that.
Thanks. Is that better?
Obviously, for anybody that you know might be new to what Flutter is, Flutter isn't like React Native where we're doing JavaScript and some abstraction converting into another language. This is another language, so we are coding at this point in Dart.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this is my main.dart, which the Flutter tooling will generate for you. And it'll spit out a little bit of code, but it'll dump in a material app. So when you spin up a brand new Flutter project, you can just take that material app and then wrap it in our Authenticator component. And with a few more lines to configure Amplify, you're off and running. And you've got basically the app I have here. And I think we can probably link to some docs. We've got some really beautiful docs on our website that show all the different use cases for the Authenticator, but it's definitely my preferred go-to when I'm building Amplify apps now, because I can just, in a couple lines of code, have a full authentication experience. And so, yeah, and now
like,
we can
just wanted to highlight specifically about the Authenticator that, you know, Amplify itself kind of makes it easy for you to integrate, you know, these use cases in your app. Because the APIs are like, you know, much more intuitive and like declarative use case based rather than like having to understand the specific services APIs. But with, you know, it might have taken you a couple of hours to get your app fully deployed and everything. But with the Authenticator, just like in a couple of minutes, you can see the value of Amplify and then like customize the UI, the theming, all of that. So it is like super powerful way for you to just try out Amplify and get auth integrated into your app. And then, you know, take it to customization as needed for your app going forward.
Just a question on that. So if we were to say create the auth, like use the auth component and build it all in Amplify, but then say I want to use, like a company that I'm working with is used to using CDK, right? I know that we can export from CDK. That all comes with it, right? So when we go and export the CDK and take the front end and go and deploy it into our new account, because that's what the customer over there is using, it's the same, right? So you've just spent minutes in terms of a couple of lines of code to build out your entire backend and front end, then export to CDK, take the front end application, redeploy it through CDK in the other side, and now you've just scaled your application out to multiple accounts.
Precisely.
Cool.
That's exactly what we've heard a lot of customers using our export functionality to do. Is like, if you imagine, like, I'm an employee in a big company trying to get a prototype up and running. I build it with Amplify, and then I can do export and get that CDK construct, and then I can drop that CDK construct into an existing CI/CD pipeline that I have to make sure that everything is being configured according to the policies of my DevOps team. So it's a pretty common use case, and especially in those instances where, like, it's a very big enterprise team with very stringent, like, the DevOps policies. Absolutely.
So for someone that was coming along and saying, hey, I need to, like, build an authentication mechanism as part of my Dart application, I want to take advantage of Amplify. Can you go back, Dylan, and show us, like, as part of the project, where that backend, where you're configuring and setting up that backend code, such as, we saw briefly as you brought it up, like the Cognito, it's obviously interfacing with Cognito to do the authentication. Just give us a quick overview and run through of, like, the backend code that's being deployed alongside this, so that you have an authentication mechanism to log in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll bring back my VS Code window and just open up my terminal here. The beauty of this is I set up this backend like an hour before this stream started, and it's literally a couple of commands. You type in amplify init in your console. If you have the Amplify CLI, if not, it's really easy. Just do npm install AWS Amplify CLI. And then you'll have the Amplify command. You run amplify init, and then right after that, you run amplify add auth, and that's pretty much it. You do an amplify push, and you're good to go. So it's just 3 commands to get up and running, which I find really spectacular. It makes it so easy to just spin up, example projects like this, or POCs if you're working on, some new idea, and then if it turns out to be a great idea, you just keep going with it, and it's really amazing.
And once you created that backend as well, you can pull that backend into other apps as well, right? Like, I know a lot of the people that are watching on the channel right now probably have a React app already, but they probably don't have, like, a mobile app, and they might want to start building the same thing with the mobile app. So Amplify allows you to pull those same resources that's creating in the cloud across different frameworks and languages too, which is a nice add.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then you're not constrained to only using the front end component. Like here, you've got your authenticator UI component, but if you wanted to access the identity, so the actual, you've gone and authenticated, we want to access the identity claim, which is our JWT, then we can still access that in our code. We don't actually have to just use the UI components. So we can do a little bit of both. Here we want to authenticate, but then we want to pull the username from the identity so that we can say, hey, user, how are you, on the page type thing. That's one of the things that I found most helpful, I guess, in starting with the components, but then actually going back to just the Amplify libraries, and then using the libraries to sort of pull out what you need, or customizing your application.
Yeah, that exactly. And we try to solve both the most basic use cases in like the most delightful way possible, but then also, like, not restrain you from doing, like, more advanced stuff. If you do need like you said, the JWT tokens, which are being passed back and forth with Cognito, more of an advanced use case, but we provide, like, clean escape patches basically to access that functionality still.
And from what also Dylan mentioned about the authenticator wrapping the material app, what's really great about that is also that the authenticator is aware about your session and aware whether you're authenticated or not. And if you're authenticated, then it's bypassing that sign-in form and then taking you immediately to the child of the authenticator widget. So a big part of building that login flow is also, like, building in, like, with Flutter, you probably do something like a stream builder or something like that. And you basically listen in to make sure that once the user is authenticated, basically routing them to the main homepage of your application. We do that for you. So that's really powerful and takes away a lot of that overhead. And then on top of that, then you can use all of the authentication APIs that are available for you from the authentication category. And at that point, you can guarantee that user is signed in, because the authenticator has ensured that your user is only in that part of the application after they've signed in.
Right. The authenticator and other UI components are just like our opinionated way to solve a lot of the most common use cases by integrating like the application UI code with the libraries themselves, like you would have built in your own application, but we kind of make it really simple for you to integrate with and solve majority of the use cases. And maybe like Dylan, you can talk a bit more about what all screens and flows are part of the authenticator and some of the customization as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned like theming, like Flutter has a lot of APIs built into its offering that allow you to customize the look and feel of your application, and we just hook into those like you would expect. So if you decorate your buttons a certain way throughout your app, and you've described that in your application already, then our authenticator component just responds naturally to that. So that's really nice. In terms of like all the flows and screens that we offer, like, there are various times that you might want to do like MFA via like an SMS text message. So you want to make sure that there's a second factor of authentication. So we support that right out of the box, and that's there's no extra configuration set up outside of like making sure your backend's configured. But if you've done that through the Amplify CLI, it's really straightforward, and the UI components will just respond to that. So we try to make sure that however you have your backend configured, that we have a nice flow for that user that's onboarding.
Very nice. What does the audience think checking this out? Like, I'd be interested if anyone's actually played with Flutter in the audience side of the equation. What I did do earlier is I did share the documentation that we've got for some of the connected components through the authenticator as well. So definitely open that up and take a look at yourselves as well. Dylan, do you want me to just quickly bring it up and share with the audience as well? I've got it handy on my side, so I can just pull it up and we can swap screens for a quick second.
Yeah, please.
Let me swap it around. Here we go. So this is what we shared in the chat beforehand, right? So you can see what the iOS view looks like. You can see sign in, create account, super interactive. So these aren't static images. You can have a look at the web and desktop view of the same window. So you can see what that experience looks like. You've got a quick walkthrough of what's actually needed to pull this stuff down, add authenticator to your application as well. So you've got good code examples. I think if I flip to like iOS or Android as well, like with iOS, I think there's a couple of ways that you can do this stuff. So usually the Amplify teams come up with a couple of nice ways to do it, depending on what you're using. And then you've got like configuration, customization, headless usage, right? So if we go customization, like what does internationalization look like? What can you do with the labels and text? Like if you want to relabel them, what can you do with different fields and stuff? So I don't know if you guys have any. Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, Dylan, how about we do this? Customization at the end. How about we just grab that example right from the docs and drop it into the app and see how that looks?
Yep.
Let's do that.
So give us an idea of some of the components that customers are asking for that we're thinking that might be like good items to release next. At the moment, the components here, it's like, we've got our like nice authenticator, but what are the other components that we think we're going to be able to see soon in Flutter?
There's about 3 things that we're hearing a lot of customers ask for. One of them is a user profile component. So after I sign in, having a place for me to be able to see my profile and be able to adjust my user attributes, to be able to, for example, if I have optional MFA set up in my backend incognito, I want to be able to turn that on as a user, having the ability to do these types of things. Another part is being able to, for example, do things like set up my device for one-time password. So that's another use case. That's on the user profile side. Another couple of things that developers are asking for are easy ways for them to be able to drop data from the backend. So whether they're using GraphQL or REST API, and dropping that into a table component. That's another thing that I'm hearing customers ask for. And then the third thing is an easy way to be able to upload files to S3 through some sort of UI component that's connected to our storage category. Those are the 3 big things that I'm hearing.
Are they going to be on Flutter first, or are they going to be across the whole ecosystem?
Let me just like answer a little bit about that. So the UI components actually came out first for JavaScript, starting with React, and then some of the more popular UI frameworks like Angular and Vue. You can see those currently on the dock side alongside Flutter. So Flutter is the only non-JavaScript framework right now that's got like the Amplify components built out. And on the JavaScript side, like we released new versions of the UI components for the authenticator this year. But previously we had, like, if you go to the docs, you'll see legacy components as well. So over there you can see like there's a storage component for the S3 use cases that Abdallah was talking about. There's a chatbot one as well, and on the new connected components there's one for Geo as well. So like we will definitely work on getting parity for those use cases, because that's already kind of being used by customers. We know the demand is there and we want to support that across all the platforms. And then of course, like the data use cases Abdallah mentioned, that is also something that we're looking at. But I would say that we would go for parity first, so you can reference the docs to kind of know what's most likely to come next.
So obviously parity first, covering the components you've already got and bringing them to Flutter. But for the new ones that that Abdullah was talking about, the profile, the table, will these start in JavaScript first and then come to Flutter, or will you build them for Flutter and then?
So I think the question was to me, like, what are customers asking for? So in terms of like what customers are asking for, like that's what I hear customers are asking for. In terms of like sequencing of what we're actually going to be putting out, I think that's gonna, like, there are some plans internally about that. I definitely think that it's definitely going to be first getting to parity, exactly like what Ashish was saying. But I think after that, it's going to be like really trying to listen to customers and trying to determine then from that what the priority is.
Exactly. It'd be working backwards from customer data to figure out what to launch next.
Yeah. No, exactly. Dylan, I might pull your screen back up if you're ready.
Yeah, go for it.
Here we go. So we've got the sign-in window showed to everyone.
So I wanted to kind of show a bit more of that customization. So in the center here, I'm going to pull up kind of the old view we were looking at. And then I wanted to show kind of how much you can really customize here. So on in the center here was what we were looking at. And then on the right here, I've added like a Flutter logo at the top, which could be like your business logo. I've changed the padding and the margins. I've updated the color and the button layout. So instead of having a tab view for the sign in and create account, I've updated the location and the text for both to the bottom. And so basically you have full range of customizability here. And the beauty is that, this still responds fully to the state of the authentication and making sure that your customer is always looking at the screen they're supposed to. So no matter how you want the look and feel of your authentication experience to look and happen, we're going to make sure that we can support that and that it's secure and sound.
Nice. And I remember like if you've got flows like 2FA and stuff like that, like those are really well handled too, because a lot of the time customers don't just have a straight up vanilla authentication flow, at least through the customers that I've worked with.
Exactly.
So do you know, for anyone that's here, are you guys planning to be at reInvent, or will you be supporting, whatever's coming out, if there is anything coming out at reInvent remotely?
I think Ashish and I are going to be at reInvent. Yes.
Yeah. There'll be a bunch of people from the Amplify team there, and I think the schedule is also live, so you can kind of go and search for content for Amplify. Breakouts, workshops, chalk talks, all of that. So
I saw Matt earlier was messaging me saying that he'll be at reInvent. So for people, or, for any members of the audience that are looking to provide like their in-person feedback, we do talk about listening to what customers say and what customers hear, and it can be hard for people in the community to understand how that progresses all the way through, basically back to the product team. And we deal with like customers on a day-to-day basis, and the product team, like that, they do less so than the people that are touching and working with the customers. We take the feedback, what the customers are saying, and talk back to the team. Team might then interact with those customers. So those decisions are made by what our customers are calling out and they're saying that they want, and that's how it works. So the that you want some feature and you go ahead and talk to your account SA by using a general connect, by reaching out across these communities within, either over Twitter directly to those people or, within the Amplify Discord and those sorts of channels. That's where that feedback is coming back for the team. And, to meet some of the actual, the guys behind the scene that are building and implementing this stuff in person could be really valuable for people that have some ideas of what they want to go or some questions about how to implement or build something.
Definitely reach out on the Discord channel, or like if you have specific kind of feedback for the Amplify library you're using today, or like a feature request for incremental features, completely new categories, whatever. I would say GitHub is the place to file that. That definitely gets a lot of visibility from our teams. Abdallah will likely respond almost right away. So I highly recommend checking that out, and you can see a lot of the feature requests that we've kind of actually launched stuff for on any of our libraries. And the Flutter one, like I called out, the inception of it all was all from a feature request on the JS library. So we really do look at that and prioritize our roadmap based on things customers open and tell us on GitHub.
Yeah, and I've seen customers add things to the code base, change the documentation as well, not just ask for feature requests. So it's a really nice model that you guys have with the community, and the Discord is very active with lots of people building apps on it. So I can see that it was daylight when I was talking to everyone on the Flutter Amplify team here, and I can see that it's now nighttime. So what I might do is I might wrap it up. It will be awesome to see you guys at reInvent. If anyone watching the stream is coming to reInvent, come find us. If you want to, you know what we look up like. So come say hi. But I'm going to be very excited to see where both the JavaScript and the Flutter space lands with the Amplify team. So thank you very much for coming on, and I'll let you enjoy your evening. Stay back for about 2 minutes of me, but I'll end the stream. And thanks to the great audience. It's quite a good turnout that I can see today. So we might have been quiet in the chat, but there's a lot of people watching. So thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks everyone for coming on.